This is Egon Cholakian. Hello to those with whom I routinely communicate, and likewise hello to those new to my scientific insight. The information I presented in my prior address regarding the events of November 24, 2023 in the Mariana Trench region has seemingly ignited an extraordinary level of public interest. I would add, ironically, not so much from within the corridors of my usually supportive scientific community, but instead from the ever-growing ranks of the public at large. This phenomenon, I further suspect, is largely owing to the conspicuous and frequent occurrence of climatic anomalies in the greater region. Regardless of the reasoning underlying this extraordinary interest from the general public, it is eminently clear to me that the discussion is now being stoked by the same constituency of deeply interested persons, which in essence provides mute, indicting testimony to the legitimacy of my earlier assertions of adverse geophysical activities. I am truly impressed and grateful, thank you. Otherwise, with this said, dear colleagues and representatives of the Russian scientific establishment, my delivery this day is targeted almost entirely at your esteemed community of distinguished and learned individuals. If you are actual, legitimate scientists, and not merely puppets of a corrupt political system, I would have great difficulty believing that you would not have fully comprehended precisely what I had communicated in my previous video. As I have already elaborated on the critical events of November 24, 2023 at great length, provoking consternation amongst many within your community, regrettably I feel it is necessary to provide even further insight on the issue in order that you may grasp the gravity of the matter at hand. This extraordinary action is a task which ought to have been provided by your Academy of Sciences. My choice to go beyond the norm is elementary. Specifically, the vast majority of you are not engaged in actual science, but rather in political opportunism and grant-seeking medicacy. Please tell me I am wrong. Sadly, your sole objective is to extract as much research funding as possible from the state. I have irrefutable evidence substantiated by the catastrophic shifts in climate unfolding right before your eyes. Please try and disprove my words. People are noticing this on their own now, without your help. What has happened over the past 2 years and now in the present are unprecedented climate records that exceed all known scientific parameters. The events of November 24, 2023 marked a turning point for our planet, one that the majority of so-called scientists refuse to acknowledge. But I've said it before and I will state it again. The history of humanity and life on Earth is now divided into before and after this same exact date. A critical question arises now. Why was this not communicated to the public? Why was no effort made to explain the mechanisms at play? The likely answer is that most scientists were simply unaware of these processes, and those who did know sat in silence, just as I once did, gripped by fear, not only for their own lives, but for all humanity. Because the truth is terrifying. Now listen carefully. I will explain what happened to those who call themselves scientists, yet are so far removed from real science as I am from ballet. The triggers for the seismic events in the Mariana Trench were a series of intramantle explosions, which are recorded at the surface as deep focus earthquakes. In the plastic mantle, nothing can experience brittle deformation. Only explosions occur there, and their energy rivals the detonation of multiple nuclear bombs. And what you say about deep focus earthquakes is blatantly false. During intermantle explosions, the acoustic wave propagates tangentially. If multiple explosions occur in succession within the mantle, the subsequent waves amplify the energy of the initial acoustic wave. This phenomenon is known as resonance. So on the day before November 24th, and on November 24th, 2023, no fewer than 10 deep focus earthquakes with magnitudes exceeding 4.0 occurred in the southwestern Pacific, within the Tonga Kermatic Island Arc region and near the Fiji Islands. The strongest of these reached a magnitude of 5.0. Following this, on November 24th, a powerful earthquake with a magnitude of 6.9, initially recorded as 7.1, struck the northern Mariana Islands at a depth of 22 kilometers, that is to say 14 miles. This was followed by a series of aftershocks in the same area, exceeding 50 earthquakes with magnitudes of at least 4.0, 10 of which were above 5.0. The depth of this intense aftershock sequence was just 10 kilometers, that is to say 6 miles. Given that the average depth of the Pacific Ocean is about 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles, this means that these earthquakes originated a mere 6 kilometers, 4 miles beneath the ocean floor in that same region. Typically, this area experiences only about 40 earthquakes per year, with magnitudes above 2.0 and only a few exceeding 5.0. Such an extreme level of seismic activity in the Mariana Trench had never been recorded in the entire history of observations. On that day, magma surged unusually close to the surface, posing a grave risk of a lava breach in the Earth's crust at its thinnest point, the Mariana Trench. The seismic unrest culminated in a deep focus earthquake within the trench, measuring 5.3 in magnitude at a depth of 231 kilometers or 144 miles, a direct consequence of magma advancing beneath this zone. At any moment that day, the Mariana Trench could have ruptured. Had this happened, ocean water held under immense pressure at a depth of 11 kilometers or 7 miles would have come into direct contact with the scorching magma. The result would have been nothing short of planetary devastation, following the same fate as Mars. A similar rupture in the Martian crust occurred in the Valle Marineris region, stripping Mars of its ocean, atmosphere, magnetic field, and ultimately all life. On November 24, 2023, Earth narrowly avoided this outcome, but the probability of a Martian scenario was alarmingly high. We were hanging by a thread. I understand the underlying physical processes, and that is why those were the most terrifying 24 hours of my entire life. Yes, humanity was undoubtedly fortunate that day. But what if similar seismic events accompanied by deep focus mantle explosions had occurred not in the Mariana Trench, but in Siberia? We would not be having this conversation right now. The rupture of the Siberian magma plume would have been inevitable, and it would have unfolded within mere days. Such an event would have shattered the Siberian craton into multiple tectonic blocks, given the immense pressure it is currently under. Moreover, the events of November 24, 2023 in the Mariana Trench had a direct impact on the Siberian plume, further intensifying the magma pressure beneath the Siberian plate. Had such pressure been exerted on the Yellowstone supervolcano, it would have inevitably erupted. The only reason the Siberian craton has so far withstood the strain is the exceptional strength of its ancient rock formations, reinforced by layers of previous eruptions. But how much longer can it endure before reaching its breaking point? That is a rhetorical question. Even now, the craton is undergoing partial melting at a depth of 35 kilometers, about 22 miles. A rupture of the Siberian plume could occur at any moment, yet we can no longer predict precisely when. We were expelled from Russian territory in the most brutal manner. We knew everything that was happening there. We closely monitored the Siberian plume and could forecast its behavior. But now that capability has been taken from us. Any information is now beyond our reach. Yes, for now, humanity has been fortunate that the resonance of acoustic waves from intramantle explosions has not yet triggered a rupture neither in the Mariana Trench nor beneath the Siberian plume. But how long will this luck hold out? The ocean, contaminated with micro and nanoplastics, is failing to dissipate heat from the Earth's interior effectively, which in turn is accelerating the frequency of deep focus earthquakes. And you can see this increase for yourselves. As magma temperatures rise, its volume expands. This drives magma upward closer to the Earth's crust, which in turn contributes to the warming of the global ocean. In other words, magma is melting the lower layers of the Earth's crust, including those beneath the ocean, accelerating its warming. Furthermore, the advancement of the magma flow on November 24, 2023, in the Mariana Trench significantly increased heat emissions into the ocean, bringing us even closer to a catastrophe. The warming of the ocean has led to a sharp expansion of acidification zones and the decomposition of organic matter in the marine waters, which has intensified CO2 emissions from the ocean instead of its absorption. Look at your own research. In 2023, Russian scientists published a study on the Atlantic sector of the Southern Ocean based on data from the 87th expedition of the research vessel Akademik Mstislav Keldysh in 2021 through 2022. These findings established that the decomposition of organic matter in Southern Ocean waters is now leading to CO2 emissions rather than sequestration. According to model data from Australian researchers, CO2 emissions over the Southern Ocean have increased by approximately 150% compared to pre-industrial levels due to a 0.5 degrees Celsius rise in ocean surface temperature. Previously, the Southern Ocean absorbed 40% of all atmospheric CO2. Now it is beginning to release it. And what is happening in the rest of the world's oceans, given the significant warming of marine waters, their acidification, and the collapse of entire ecosystems? Now consider this. What was the single most significant contribution of marine biota which is now dying off? Oxygen. It was the ocean, not forests, that served as the planet's primary lungs. And I am not even speaking yet about the forest, or even wetlands, that in various parts of the world are now beginning to absorb oxygen and emit CO2. Recall the findings of Brazilian researchers. Over the past decade, the Amazon rainforest has released nearly 20% more carbon dioxide than it has absorbed. And this is not only due to wildfires, but also the genetic mutations occurring in the trees. Likewise, Russian scientists have documented a similar phenomenon. In the Irkutsk region, since the early 20th century, coniferous forests, especially larch, had been effectively sequestering excess atmospheric CO2. But since the late 1980s, the situation has reversed. Instead of absorbing excess carbon dioxide, large forests have begun to release it into the atmosphere. Researchers have observed the same trend in Mongolia and Yakutia. CO2 emissions from the ocean and the biosphere will only continue to accelerate, further disrupting the planet's atmospheric water balance. This is an irrefutable fact, and the hydrological cycle in the atmosphere has been disrupted, and this disruption is worsening. In October 2024, the Global Commission on the Economics of Water released a report stating that the water cycle is getting out of balance. To quote verbatim, beyond the natural bound of variability we have known for the last 12,000 years, changing precipitation patterns which are the source of all fresh water. The report further states, we already feel the impact of an altered hydrological cycle and its interactions with atmospheric dynamics, with increasing frequency and severity of droughts and floods around the world. End quote. And now, let me pose a question for you to ponder. What happens in the atmosphere after the disruption of the water cycle? Answer me, please. For those unaware, let me explain. Once the atmospheric water cycle is disrupted, the next inevitable stage is the breakdown of the gas exchange process, which will lead to the gradual depletion of oxygen. This is what happens when the biosphere stops producing oxygen and instead begins generating CO2. Trees are already emitting more carbon dioxide, and after November 24, 2023, the ocean has also begun actively releasing CO2 instead of oxygen. Your so-called experts prefer to stay silent on this reality. Very soon, irreversible changes will occur. Changes we warned about a decade ago. Back then, no one listened. Now it is an undeniable fact for all to see. The ocean is warming, acidifying, and in essence dying. It requires urgent intervention. Yet instead of taking practical action, we continue playing political games. Let me tell you what will soon become the most precious resource: oxygen. It will surpass even bread and water in value because, quite simply, we will no longer have air to breathe. Even without the catastrophic scenario of the Siberian plume rupture, the atmosphere as we know it will soon begin to collapse, following the fate of the oceans. And this will be accompanied by additional consequences. Take, for example, the increasing frequency of tornadoes reaching extreme wind speeds. Typically, the most powerful tornadoes peak at around 320 kilometers per hour. That's about 200 miles per hour, which is already highly destructive. But on May 21st, 2024, in Iowa, in the United States, an EF4 rated tornado was recorded with a subvortex reaching an extraordinary speed of 512 kilometers per hour. That is to say, 318 miles per hour, one of the highest ever measured in meteorological history. Soon such tornadoes will become a regular occurrence, with up to 1,000 tornadoes per year, until as a civilization we find ourselves facing mega hurricanes. Moreover, the weakening of the Earth's magnetic field is having a critical impact on the atmosphere. The fact that auroras are now reaching nearly to the equator is a clear indication of how fragile our magnetic shield has become. The combination of these systemic failures, the breakdown of the water cycle, the collapse of gas exchange, and the weakening of the magnetic field will inevitably lead to megastorms capable of reducing entire cities to dust. Some so-called experts have suggested that instead of a planned, controlled degassing of the Siberian plume, we should attempt degassing through the Yellowstone supervolcano. Anyone proposing such an idea is either fundamentally uneducated or deliberately lying. As a specialist in degassing, I fully understand the nature of these processes. The fundamental difference lies in the scale of influence. Supervolcanoes like Yellowstone can certainly create severe problems for humanity, but they are not capable of eradicating it entirely. The eruption of the Siberian plume, however, would be equivalent in power to the simultaneous explosion of 1,000 Yellowstones and would wipe out the entire biosphere, and with it, humanity, within mere months. Degassing Yellowstone would do absolutely nothing to eliminate the threat posed by the Siberian plume. Let me suggest an analogy. Imagine comparing a large supervolcano such as Yellowstone to a boil on the skin, whereas the Siberian plume is a ruptured artery, akin to an abdominal aortic aneurysm in medical terms. A boil can simply be lanced, releasing pus without any significant impact on the body as a whole. But an aneurysm, that is the catastrophic rupture of a major artery, a life-threatening event. A boil can be treated with antibiotics and drainage, posing a minimum risk of death. But in the case of an abdominal aortic aneurysm, even if the patient is already on the operating table under the care of a top-tier physician, the chances of survival are nearly zero. A successful outcome would require an extraordinary convergence of favorable conditions. So please do not compare a boil on the buttocks to a ruptured aortic aneurysm. That kind of thinking will do nothing good. I have been informed that scientists in Krasnoyarsk, the very one standing atop a Siberian magma plume that is currently eroding the tectonic plate at a depth of 35 kilometers, that is to say 22 miles, have made the following claim, and I quote, "It will take millions of years for magma to reactivate. And even if magma plume does emerge, it would first manifest in Siberia through new hot springs, frequent and intense earthquakes, as well as changes in Earth's magnetic field." That's their quote. Well then, allow me to respond to this profoundly ignorant statement from the people who clearly lack a fundamental understanding of their own field, because their claim directly contradicts the information I have just presented. They said, it will take millions of years for magma to reactivate. But you yourselves know perfectly well that 250 million years have already passed since the last eruption. Is that not enough for you? Right now, humanity stands at the very edge of catastrophe. If you disagree with this assertion, then provide an alternative scientific explanation for the events unfolding on our planet, one backed by evidence. Take into account the rise in deep focus earthquakes, changes in the magnetic field, and the anomalous composition and properties of erupting lava, increasing seismic activity, and the transformations occurring in the Earth's core and mantle. Factor in ocean warming, including at great depths, disruptions in the atmospheric water cycle, and changes in the upper layers of the atmosphere. For once in your life, please conduct a truly interdisciplinary study, integrating data from all these fields to answer the questions surrounding these planetary changes. This is precisely what we at ALLATRA have been doing for the past 30 years. Together with the scientific team at ALLATRA, we have presented an accurate, comprehensive picture of what is happening. Now it's your turn to provide well-substantiated scientific counterarguments. I am speaking specifically about factual scientific data, not academic titles or the number of publications an individual researcher may have. I have been informed that those who oppose this view say that I, Egon Cholakian, have a highly diverse professional background. Resorting to personal attacks instead of engaging in substantive debate is not a sign of professional competence. Rather, it is an admission of weakness and a demonstration of manipulative tactics. If you have objections, present them professionally. Rely solely on scientific arguments and concrete facts. The next assertion made by those far removed from science is this. Even if the magma plume were to become active, we would first see the emergence of new hot springs in Siberia, frequent and strong earthquakes, and changes in Earth's magnetic field. Along with another claim, we would observe intense permafrost melting, but only from the lower horizon, not from the upper layers. Let's examine these arguments more closely. The first and most crucial point is that anyone who describes these indicators as a distinct prospect is likely unaware that most of them are already happening. Let's start with permafrost. Look no further than your own research from the Russian Academy of Sciences. Review the remote sensing data from space over the Arctic. On the Yamal Peninsula alone, over 3,000 powerful gas emissions have been recorded, forming craters on the bottoms of the thermokrust, lakes, rivers, and coastal areas of the Kara Sea. In 2022 through 2023, for the first time, large mud volcanic formations were discovered at the bottom of 2 thermokrust lakes on Yamal. Monitoring these formations has revealed periodic underground fluid emissions, including gas. Let me clarify for those unacquainted with the topic. Thermokarst lakes form due to the thawing of permafrost. Mud volcanism beneath these lakes, with eruptions from their beds, indicates deep subsurface clay melting and its subsequent expulsion to the surface. So tell me, what is this, if not the melting of permafrost from below? And are you not aware that rock temperatures, particularly at the edges of the tectonic plate, are rising? Just how extreme does this warming need to be for the rock to heat by 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit in mine shafts and deep boreholes? Pay attention. The entire upper layer of the plate has warmed by 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now imagine what is happening at the center of the plate, directly above the plume. What temperatures and processes are unfolding deep below, where everything is literally melting? The plume is continuously eroding the surrounding lithosphere, and its full activation is only a matter of time. I will reiterate, a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase is a catastrophic figure. If you can refute this with facts, then do so, please. Regarding the claim that Earth's magnetic field must change, let's break down the connection between the magnetic field and the Siberian magma plume. As early as the 1990s, a correlation was discovered between the frequency of geomagnetic reversals and the intensity of mantle magmatism. It is only logical that these reversals are linked to processes occurring in the outer core near the core mantle boundary. And are you unaware that the excursion of the North Magnetic Pole, the very onset of the geomagnetic reversal, is already well underway? Is it not enough for you that the North Magnetic Pole is already shifting toward you, moving in the direction of the Taimyr Peninsula? It is also well known that the melting of the Earth's crust by a magma plume leads to a reduction in the thickness of the magnetically active lithospheric layer. In other words, the lithosphere above the plume loses its magnetization. Negative anomalies in magnetic properties can indicate active melting of the tectonic plate by ascending magma flow. Yes, residual lithospheric positive anomalies from past eruptions remain in the form of solidified rock. But why do you fail to acknowledge the progressive negative lithospheric magnetic anomalies in the Krasnoyarsk region? Anomalies we have been tracking for 20 years before you expelled us from the region. All of these processes are the inevitable consequences of a single root cause: the heating occurring beneath our feet. Magma is intensifying and the mantle is melting and turning into liquid. As magma heats, it expands in volume, inevitably eroding and destabilizing the Earth's crust. Show the satellite thermography of these regions from recent years. Show the temperature shifts over the past decade in deep boreholes and at depths of at least 3 kilometers, or 1.9 miles, and beyond. Show the changes in the lithospheric magnetic field over the last 10 years. Refute my words with hard data. Now, regarding the emergence of hot springs and strong earthquakes, where exactly do you expect to see these as precursors? Directly above the Siberian plume? Those who make such claims are relying on a weak understanding of geology based solely on examples of volcanoes and supervolcanoes. I have already explained, Yellowstone, in comparison to the Siberian plume, is like a boil compared to an abdominal aortic aneurysm. Therefore, it is foolish to expect the same warning signs that precede a supervolcanic eruption. Let's begin with this. We will not see strong earthquakes above the Siberian plume until the very moment of its catastrophic rupture. Why is that? The answer lies in the structure of the East Siberian craton. Magma in this region solidifies in a highly dense, almost monolithic form. The eruptions that occurred 250 million years ago permeated the entire tectonic plate, reinforcing and cementing it with the Siberian traps. The uneven thawing of permafrost across Siberia reveals variations in rock density. Where the permafrost melts faster, the rock is looser. Where it melts more slowly, the rock is denser. Overall, the structure of the East Siberian craton remains highly monolithic and robust. This means that the crustal block will not gradually crumble. Let me illustrate this with yet another analogy. If we compare the Siberian platform structure to that of glass, when pressure is applied to the center of a glass pane, cracks appear only fractions of a second before the entire sheet shatters. Unlike wood, which deforms gradually under stress, glass breaks suddenly and catastrophically. If similar fractures begin to propagate through the tectonic plate, we will not have even a moment to react or to warn anyone, let alone publish a news report about it. This analogy should be more than sufficient to those with an understanding of geophysical processes to grasp what is happening in Siberia right now. We will not witness significant tectonic shifts until the moment the Siberian platform ruptures. Some precursor earthquakes may occur along the edges of the plate, but when strong quakes begin directly above the plume, it will mean that only minutes, at most a few hours, remain before a catastrophic event. Any competent scientist will confirm these conclusions. And the increase in seismic activity at the periphery of the crustal block, where the Siberian plume is exerting pressure, has already begun. Take a closer look at the seismic activity in the Ural Mountains, Lake Baikal, and the Verkhoyansk Range. As for the hot springs you claim would have emerged as a warning sign, ask the people in these peripheral regions. Cases of hot water appearing in wells are being reported with increasing frequency. Are these not the very hot springs you were expecting? What I am presenting is not political speculation. It is a scientific description of physical processes grounded in facts, not assumptions or fear-mongering. My objective is not to incite panic, but to prepare people for the events ahead so that they can take action to save their own lives. When the activation of the Siberian plume becomes inevitable, no intervention will be possible. However, in the coming years, we will witness severe catastrophic events, extreme cold spells, hurricane-force winds, and other natural cataclysms. The economic losses will be astronomical, and the blame will lie squarely on the prioritization of political ambitions over common sense and real science. Were it not for political barriers, a planned, controlled degassing of the Siberian plume would have been addressed long ago, or at the very least thoroughly studied. Many of the consequences we are already experiencing could have been prevented. In the current year and beyond, do not be surprised by record-breaking temperatures. Each new record inexorably shortens the lifespan of Earth's biosphere. Yet instead of investigating and informing the public, Russian scientists have made statements such as this: people who live here in Siberia naturally should not be afraid of anything in this respect. Nothing threatens their lives. They should focus on raising their children, caring for their families, and not worrying about such a ridiculous thing as this catastrophe. They are telling people what they should and should not fear and how they should raise their children. Is this the response of a scientist? What kind of commands are they issuing to the public? Life is not a game, and playing with people's lives is despicable. What kind of directive is do not be afraid? I am an American, and yet I fear what is happening in Russia. I fear for the safety of Russian citizens more than your so-called scientists do. And yet you are being told that Siberia is one of the safest tectonic regions and that you should not be afraid of anything. If I were in your place, I would have many serious questions for these so-called experts. Why do your scientists remain ignorant of the fundamental facts I am presenting? Because they have not studied them. They have not observed them. They are too preoccupied with politics and protecting their cushy positions. But science is not politics. Science is, above all, responsibility. Russians, remember the names of every scientist who is deceiving you right now. Soon you will see everything with your own eyes, and you will have a valid reason to ask them one simple question. Why did you lie to us? Unfortunately, that reckoning is inevitable. And now I turn directly to Russian scientists. Every word I have spoken is backed by evidence. If you have objections, let's engage in a scientific dialogue. But what do I see instead? Empty philosophical musings and disgraceful personal attacks. I understand exactly why you do this. You are deliberately manipulating the public's perception to conceal the truth from them. That is simply vile. You accuse me of chasing hype by discussing high-profile issues. The truth is, I do not profit from telling people the truth. On the contrary, I dedicate my personal time and resources earned over a lifetime to this very cause. And you know what? Every single one of our ALLATRA volunteers does precisely the same. For 10 years now, we have been telling the truth about the climate. And now, for that, former ALLATRA volunteers in Russia are being persecuted by your very own FSB. Think about it. The FSB is torturing law-abiding citizens who, in their free time, worked to study climate change. They are suffocating them with plastic bags over their heads, and they are electrocuting them with stun guns. Some former ALLATRA volunteers in Russia have already been imprisoned. Others are facing criminal charges based on fabricated accusations. They are being labeled terrorists and enemies of Russia. And to what end? Because they wanted to live. Because they wanted their children to live. The real terrorists are those issuing criminal orders to lie to you, Russians, in the name of science. I understand that what I am saying will never reach the president of Russia. I have already addressed Mr. Putin, and I warned him about the threat of the Siberian magma plume. At the time, I sincerely believed that Russia still had honorable officers capable of delivering my message to their president. Clearly, my hope was in vain. But still, I would like to ask, Mr. Putin, tell me, do you feel no shame? Are you not ashamed of what you have done to your country? While your father once fought against Nazism, you are allowing it to flourish within your own state. A group of Nazis in your country has created a parallel system of governance, and they now wield more real power than you, the elected president. The entire world sees this except for you. Are you in control of those who are subjecting your citizens to brutal repression across the country, stripping them of their constitutional rights? Whose orders are they really following? Mr. Putin, you often speak of pride. Tell me, what exactly are you proud of? Are you proud of your state religion? Then look at what you have done to it. Your religion has been transformed into a political and punitive instrument. Those who genuinely tried to preserve faith, your Nazis drove them out of Russia. You say you are proud of your nation. Then why do you not safeguard the lives of Russian citizens? Are you proud of your country's power? And what good is that power when beneath your feet lies a magma plume the size of Australia? The powerful state you have built is, in reality, nothing more than a colossus on clay feet, one that could vanish at any moment. If you genuinely believe you control everything in your country, then answer this question. Why, 10 years ago, when the threat of the Siberian magma plume first became known, were no measures taken to ensure the safety of Russia and its citizens? Ask your inner circle this question. Even back then, the necessary steps to prevent a global catastrophe were outlined. There were discussions about the planned degassing of the Siberian plume and the potential for restoring the ocean. I vividly remember your early statements about democracy, Mr. Putin, and I want to believe that you are not a Nazi. But look at reality. Look at what is happening in your country now. If you are content with the current state of affairs, then I am speaking into the void. And now I turn once again to the Russian scientists. To all those spreading disinformation, I ask, when will you remember that you are scientists, not mouthpieces for the FSB? Why are you deceiving so many people? You are not only lying to your own citizens, your soothing lies are being spread to the entire world, lulling people into a false sense of security. It seems that all you are capable of is closing your eyes to reality, misleading the public, and punishing the innocent. At a time when climatic and geodynamic threats are escalating like an avalanche, you tell your citizens not to be afraid and to focus on raising their children. Where is your reason? Where is your humanity? If politics is all that matters to you, if you have been so thoroughly indoctrinated that it has become more important to you than the lives of children, then we are powerless. That would mean that we, the ALLATRA researchers, have wasted several decades of our lives in vain, striving to save this world. My friend, I have nothing more to add.